So we're going to have two topics today, and then I'll just do a little bit of economic update initially. So the two topics primarily they're fairly connected. One is a bit about climate change, and then that sort of leads into heating and cooling your own home and how to keep your house efficient. So initially talking about economic update, we've had a fall in the markets in October this year. We've had a run of 2 years where we've had pretty much every month the share market's gone up in Australia and overseas. And the question is, is this a start of a bit of a downturn, or is this just a bit of a blip on the horizon? Nobody really sees that there's a major downturn, because what we're really looking for and what you really want is profits from your investments. And this is just the share market profits for this year and the projected profits for next year. So profits still going up. You always have cycles of profits. So last 2 years have been very good. That's why the share market's been going up. Roughly had a 20% rise in share markets in Australia and overseas in the last 2 years. So basically ever since Donald Trump came in, that sparked the market to rise. But along with it has been the profits. So if you saw the profits going down and the share market going up, then you'd be worried. But as long as the profit's going up and the share market's aligned with that, that's okay. Okay, less profits next year, primarily in Australia, but the US is still looking good. Japan, profits are good. So we don't see a major correction in the sense of market falling. A bit about Australian dollar. A lot of people are interested in Australian dollar. If you're going overseas, is it going up or down? Of course, it depends on what's happening overseas. Australian dollar's pretty much at the right parity as far as buying power. The second issue is that we have seen a decline in the Australian dollar. It was over $1 US a few years ago, but now down about 70 cents. Projection is from AMP at least that we expect a bit more of a fall in the Australian dollar now. The reason for that is not because we've got a bad economy, not because we're in Venezuela, it's because we don't have the interest rates that we had in America. So American interest rates have gone up 0.75% this year. We haven't gone up for over 2 years or 3 years, I think it is. So our interest rates are now lower than the 10-year bond rate in the US. So what that does is suck money out of Australia, and they're going to sell their Australian dollars, buy US dollars, and that's why there's a movement of money out of Australia, and that's why there's going to be a little bit of pressure on the Australian dollar. The positive though is we're still making trade surpluses, so our balance of trade's good, and last month was $3.5 billion in surplus. So that does counter the fall, because we've got people buying Australian dollars to actually bring to pay for the coal and iron ore and gas these days, and perhaps and also the agricultural products. So there's a bit of counterweight there, but it's been hanging around 70 cents, but might get a bit weaker in the next 12 months if we don't raise interest rates, and we don't see rates probably rising much next year, maybe 0.25% to 0.5% if the Australian economy starts to get inflation. House prices, this is the big news, is that house prices are on the way down in Sydney and Melbourne. Sydney rose around 75% in 5 years, and Melbourne's about 50% in 5 years. Now, that's roughly a 15% rise every year for Sydney and 10% for Melbourne. Of course, people's wages are not going up 10 to 15%, so how are people being able to afford this? Well, it's because there's been interest rates have been driven down, and people can borrow more money. So if you can borrow more money, the price of houses go up because everyone's going to the auction with more money in their pocket. So we've got this now downturn in Sydney and Melbourne, which is reflecting the fact that now banks are tightening their lending practices, and the banks are lending less money, and there's also less people getting loans. So there's a double effect there, and that's pulling the market down in Sydney, Melbourne. And that's because their prices are probably, Sydney prices are roughly double Canberra, and probably Melbourne prices are about 50% more than Canberra. So that, you might have the same income as Canberra, and then have to buy a house nearly twice the price on average. So the key thing there is houses in Sydney, Melbourne were probably overvalued, and they're coming back a bit. Canberra's not too bad because we haven't had the huge boom over the last 5 years. And that's primarily because we've had cutbacks in the public service. So people, when you hear somebody's going to lose their job or get redundant, you don't go out and buy a house properly. You're going to be a bit more conservative. So house prices really have only picked up in the last 12 months in Canberra. The average price in Canberra went up supposedly by 11%. So we don't look like we've had the boom. We probably won't see the bust. And the second issue is that there is often a correlation between Labor parties coming into Canberra and a boom in the housing market. So if we have a change of government next year, we could have a change there. Because generally they employ more people. People come into Canberra, they need a house, then you need more houses, so they bring in builders from outside. So you have this double compound, and you'll have 1 year you can rent your garage out, and next year you can't even rent the house out. So we get a bit of a boom bust that way. But the key thing is, Canberra's looking at not a bust in the housing market. Another one is Perth, which went through the resources boom, then went through the bust in the last couple of years. So they've had 3 or 4 years of falling house prices over there, and it's starting just to pick up now because the resource sector's picking back up. So houses, a bit of a mixed bag. You've got the Sydney, Melbourne markets, and then you've got pretty much everyone else. So now we'll talk about climate change and impact in Australia and ourselves. It has an impact on everything we spend money on. So the key thing is that you've got major bushfires, major cyclones and major floods in Australia. It's always been the way. In Australia, we've always had those events because it's a dry continent. Not the driest continent, but the dry continent. But the key thing is it does impact on all sorts of things, from your infrastructure when things get either washed away or things get burnt. If you have crop failures, then it ends up in higher prices for our groceries, and in home insurance prices also go up. And there's problems of Queensland now that people find it very difficult to get insurance or to be able to cover insurance in the cyclone areas because there's been so many cyclones up there. Obviously, we're in a phase where the world is seeing higher temperatures, rising temperatures, and roughly we've seen a 1% rise in the last 100 years. And the big thing is that we're now seeing these rising temperatures. They've got the two effects, the El Nino and El La Nina. The La Nina being the warmer times, the El Nino is the cooler times. But the key thing is that we're getting more and more of these hot weather events, and the El Nino is actually not as prevalent in that situation there. So going back to the 50s and 60s, we had lower temperatures and more El Nino effects there, or less in some cases, but basically we're just getting a rise in temperatures. In fact, can have influences of volcanoes. I'm going to talk about Krakatoa in a minute because that's had a major impact in temperatures in 1883. But the big issue is that you're getting hotter temperatures, which does increase the water vapour take up out of the oceans. Also, you get higher temperatures in the middle atmosphere, decrease in your glaciers because they're melting, and decrease in sea ice, and then the polar ice caps are decreasing as well. So obviously some major impacts on the land. One of the biggest problems is that if you get the tundra in Russia melting, underneath this the permafrost, if that melts, you get a problem with a lot of methane coming out of the undersoils, and that could also be a big problem in the future. That once you unfreeze that frozen soils, you're going to have a lot of methane, and methane is actually 4 times more detrimental to the environment than carbon dioxide. So methane's a big problem. Since 1970, we've had a 19% decrease in rainfall, and decline since the 1990s of the growing season as a consequence. So the summer's coming in earlier and winter's coming in later. The oceans are warmed and they're becoming more acid. That's acidity is also one of the biggest issues in the future. If you get too acid soils, too acid oceans, your fish can't live in there. But at this stage, it hasn't been a problem. But a lot of carbon dioxide actually gets absorbed into the sea and gets to the bottom of the sea. And one problem could be eventually is that the oceans can only absorb so much carbon dioxide. Once it gets to that point, the oceans can't absorb any more kind of carbon dioxide, and then it has to be in the air and then rise into the atmosphere. So one of the issues is sea level rising. Hasn't seen a lot of that yet, but that could be a problem in the future. But the general trend of warming has just been going up and up since 1910 on records. So it's been a one-way street there, and it's really just connected with our economic activity, as in burning more coal fuels, burning more fossil fuels. And the main story here in Australia is that we've had a range of temperature rises, and we're down here. So we're roughly in the about the 1% rise range since 1910. And we've obviously got all the impacts of bushfires. So it's estimated now we're losing 1.2% of our gross national product to bushfires. And obviously that's not going to disappear. And natural disasters. The biggest area is Queensland, where you got the cyclones, because there's more moisture coming in the air. The cyclones are bigger, they've got more intensity, and they're dropping more rain as well as being higher winds. So Queensland's got the problems of both their infrastructure gets wiped out, roads, bridges, electricity lines, and then the houses as well. Queensland was compensated by the Commonwealth Government for the cyclones in 2016-17 because they tried to take out insurance. The Queensland Government tried to take insurance, but it was too expensive, so they have no insurance based on their roads, bridges, and all their infrastructure. So every time there's disaster up there, the Queenslanders have got to find the money for it. New South Wales not so bad. Queensland, Victoria not too bad. ACT even 50 million a year in lost revenues from climate change. And this is just showing you some of the droughts we've had over the last 100 years. The Millennium Drought we all remember, and we sort of look like we're coming into another drought. So Murray-Darling, during the 1996-2010 drought, the Murray-Darling Basin was very affected. 4,000 irrigators didn't have any water, basically. The Coorong became too salty for native plants and fish in that region just before the outlet into the ocean. Well, they obviously didn't get out there because it dried up beforehand. Lake Alexandrina. Wheat yields are down, cotton production down, and rice down. Cotton and rice obviously big users of water, so there wasn't water available. And you can see the big drops in production there. So in Mildura, they lost 60% of their annual income, and dairy farmers lost 80% of their income. So the farmers are really, they take it as their, they take a lot of the brunt of this because they don't have the production, and then they're caught out by not producing as much, and they obviously don't have the revenue. So today we've got 99% of, 99% of New South Wales in drought, and it could be a 1 in 400 year drought appearing, but we get just a bit of rain this week and 15-20 mils, but you'd expect a big depression coming through to give you a lot more than that, but we're just really not getting the rain in winter. Cost of farm feed is huge. The farmers have to feed, well, they're just basically going out backwards. And if they try and sell their stock, well, there's no one to buy them at a very good price anyway. So drought in New South Wales, 57% of Queensland in drought, and then a lot of the dams in Queensland are very empty. So there's no surface water, so they basically have to rely on the underground water. And Lockyer Valley have got grants from the government to do that. And then we had the help the farmers drought charity, so that came out of that. So stream fire weather patterns and longer fire seasons. That's basically going to be our patterns from now on, I guess. And since 1967 to 2003, 8,000 injuries, 433 fatalities from deaths through bushfires, and 50% of deaths from natural disasters coming from bushfires. So a big threat, and we had our own Canberra bushfires in 2003, which I think it was four people died in that one. So even in urban areas, we're not going to be insulated. So it's costing ACT and New South Wales 100 million a year in bushfires. And of course, we only recently had the bushfires down at Tathra, and half of Tathra basically got burned. So the cost is still looking to go up because basically it's getting hotter and hotter. And this is just another example of a bushfire, Waruna, Yalu, I'm not sure where that is. Our daughter did this for us, but huge areas burned. Two people died, so it's not a great thing. So people losing their homes, people spending their time in fighting bushfires. So it's all cost. This dairy farmer lost $320,000 from just losing his milk production, fences, hay, or just everything mounts up. In the government sector, you've got to replace transmission poles, transformers, overhead power lines. That was in WA, and then roads in WA. So it just adds to the cost of everything, because those costs have to be recouped from the consumers. So in WA, they've got a levy for $320 million each year for emergency services to cover these sort of things. Probably know New Zealand had the earthquake. They've got an earthquake fund where they levy, I think it's the insurers have to pay a levy to the New Zealand government, and that was what's repairing and reconstructing Christchurch. We don't have that sort of thing in Australia, it's more localised. Fortunately, we don't have earthquakes, but everything else, I think. Obviously, 2009 fires in Victoria, obviously very devastating there. I think it was one of the people died was John Naylor, one of the newsreaders in Victoria. Brian Naylor, yeah. So he and his wife as well. Yeah. So it it has impacts on so many people. Just immense amount of buildings destroyed and wildlife affected. So, and then of course it comes back in insurance claims, but some people don't have insurance. So, and this is getting prevalent up in Queensland because the cost is so high. And then of course we've got cyclones as well. We've got everything in Australia. Everything that's not good except, but Cyclone Tracy, everyone remembers that, and of course that was extraordinary. It's the most expensive cyclone we've ever had, and Cyclone Debbie in 2016. So we had 65 people in Cyclone Tracy die, 145 injured. I had a friend who came down from Darwin afterwards. He said one person died. They were running away from their house, and a sheet of iron went straight through them. So it's pretty obviously the amount of metal and stuff going around is enormous. So that was 800 million in damage. About $4.5 million in today's terms. And then Debbie in 2017, 14 fatalities, and the second most expensive after Cyclone Tracy. So yes, it all mounts up. You've got properties without power, you've got properties with schools to repair, residences that are not inhabited for a while, and some residences can't be lived in again. So it's just adds it up. And then damage to private homes, $1 billion roughly, and businesses $750 million, insurance claims, and so forth. So there's a lot of impacts on this, and we only obviously come across it every now and again, but it's just getting across the board through agriculture, through our housing, through roads and infrastructure. There's just a cost of going through all that. So basically we're saying that this is not the not a stabilising situation. Looks like temperature are projected to continue rising. More days where you're going to have fire dangers and high fire danger, and less rainfall. So the ongoing greenhouse emissions have been falling. If we can reduce our greenhouse emissions, we can stop the rate of rise. It's probably not going to stop the rising of temperatures, because we're still, Australia has, we sell 1 million cars a year, and we've got 7 million cars running around Australia. So each one of those produces the carbon dioxide that goes up in the air, and we're just only 25 million people. You've got 1.3 billion people in China, and they've something, I think there's 700 million, but there's about 700 million cars in the world, and they've got 200 or 300 million. So it's just normal. I thought I'd just talk about Krakatoa, just to give you an idea of some more impressive disaster. Probably people know that it blew up, the whole island blew up pretty much. Loudest sound in history. And 64 kilometre away, people were rupturing their eardrums. But the biggest problem was that this is a cooling effect though, because all the soot and ash went into the atmosphere. And it went all around the world. It went all around the northern hemisphere, across America and Europe. And in Europe they didn't have a summer. So they didn't have a crop production for 1 year. So that actually led to a lot of starvation and famine through Europe. Not well known, but it's just to show you that this is a cooling effect, but we're getting the opposite. But one of the effects is that if you do have volcanoes putting up the soot and particulates, it actually can drop your temperatures, but it's only a short-term effect. So we don't really need to have that sort of effect long-term, but it demonstrates how both cooling and heating are a problem. So we don't, some people say that we're 10,000 years overdue for a cooling event that is going through an ice age, but it's unlikely now because there's so much carbon dioxide in the air. And we've had ice ages obviously alternating over centuries and thousands of millions of years. But yeah, the main story is that Krakatoa showed how a eruption of a volcano can actually bring down temperatures, but not for long. So overall, we're saying that there's some major issues with climate change, and that it's going to cost us more money in the sense of our GDP, and we're going to have more severe and frequent natural disasters. So I think that's just a bit of a summary about, that people say that, climate change isn't happening. Well, you can see it's happening, whether we're causing it or something else is causing it. It's certainly, there's great correlation between between human activity, that's since the industrial age in the 19th century, where we started to burn coal and oil, and the correlation with temperatures going up. So it's pretty hard to deny that, but some people do. Might just break it there for a second, but does anyone want to drink, or everyone's got enough food there? All good? Okay. Well, I'm just going to break a myth, a bit of a mythbusters, saying that Canberra isn't cold. Now, how can I work that out? Well, if you look at Italy, which is a Mediterranean country, we actually fit in here in the central Europe, central Italy, as far as the same temperatures. So, northern Victoria, southern New South Wales and the ACT have got the same climate as Rome, or Tuscany, or Florence, if you've been there. Other parts of more southern parts, like further south in Italy is less so, but Adelaide region is very similar to the, I think that's Sicily there. So we don't have northern European winters. We don't have 2 foot of snow on the ground, but if you ask most people in Canberra, they say Canberra's cold. But in fact, if you look at the temperature variations, we are actually in winter, the winter temperatures are not as cold as Rome. So we on average get down to 0, they get down to about -3, -4. In summer, Rome is hotter, so our mid temperatures are around 35, that's around 40. but they're a little bit hotter in summer and a little bit colder in winter. So our temperatures relative to Tuscany or Rome is about the same or a bit moderate. So this is another way of looking at it. It says the central Italy there, and they're at the top of that range. So a lot of parts of Australia are really desert and Sahara desert regions. Northern regions more like southern India. So you can sort of see that we're the coldest part of Australia, but we're not cold by European standards. Tasmania's got pretty much the same, for most of central Tasmania's got the same sort of climate as England and Ireland. Northern California, where it gets a very lot of rain, is similar to there. And Chile, southern Chile, where is on the eastern side of Tasmania. So we're not bad by international standards as far as our cold or heat, but that doesn't mean we're not getting a cold winter. But we now need to think more about how efficient we do keep our houses in cooling them and heating them. So how can we improve our energy efficiencies? The big one in Canberra, of course, is heating and cooling. And heating water's up there, and then appliances is the other big one. But lighting is not that big, but it's also getting less because we're using LED lights and more efficient lighting. So 40% of home energy is spent on heating and cooling, and we can close off rooms to stop cooling, seal gaps. Now this is one thing I found interesting is that we often don't put enough energy into sealing all the gaps. We forget that underneath our doors, there's wind whistling underneath our doors, and you can put in stoppers underneath the doors to, they say, can reduce your energy bills by 25%. Use a fan rather than air conditioning because fans cost only 2 cents an hour. Ceiling fans also can push down the heat from your ceilings down because of hot air rises and most of the heat's in the ceiling. This is one we use on our house, and we find it very effective in winter, keeping the heat in, and because there's an insulation bat in there, about ½ an inch insulation bat, and once you've sealed it down, you've effectively got a double glazed house window. Also, they're good for security. It's hard to cut through those if they were trying to get in your house. Obviously, the only issue is if you have a blackout, you can't raise them. But apart from that, they're pretty good. But obviously, if a lighter colour, you've got sun reflection, light reflection against the heat coming in, and the other thing is that you've got you can actually have them half down. You can see those gaps in there. You can have them half down during the day, and it still lets the light through. So we really like those. But and it's still obviously having a thermal effect, stopping the heat coming in, the ambient heat coming through. They're about $1,000 per blind. That's the only limitation. The other one we forget to do is probably pelmets. Very common in Europe, but people forget that the hot air is going down. If you don't have a pelmet, hot air is going down your window and cooling down, getting down to the bottom again, and then you have to use your heater to heat them up again and going through a cycle. So when you don't have pelmets, you've got this huge velocity of air going around in circles, cooling and heating, which is just adding to your fuel bill. Once you do that, the air drops down below the curtain and then falls down slowly, so you don't get the velocity. So curtains with pelmets are really the way to go. You can have very heavy curtains, it doesn't really make any difference because you're not really insulating against the window. Blinds can be very effective in summer because you're not getting the ambient heat coming through. Because even if you have even if you have curtains inside, you're getting the heat moving through the window, and that's still getting into your house. So putting a blind up is pretty good, and giving you up to 65% reduction in heat absorption. And of course, using the smart appliances. Now, we haven't got that many yet, but there's smart fridges, there's smart heating systems that you can turn off on your mobile. That's probably another way we can do it in the future. I'm not sure if I haven't come across anyone who's done that yet. Does anyone use smart the smartphone to connect your heating and cooling, put the oven on. No? Turn the oven off. No?
Too old.
Yeah. Okay. Heating and water obviously accounts for a lot of energy. Obviously, the old water heaters used to have a big tank and keep that constantly hot. Well, I think most people now are moving to the instant heat because you don't have to heat it all day, and that's obviously a much more economical way of doing it. Efficient shower heads. Some people like that. Some people don't. Then you can, if you're going away, and turn off your heater, hot water systems, and wash in cold water. So 30% of your electricity bills on appliances. So best obviously to get ones that are energy rated and have a 5 or 6 stars. This is interesting. I didn't realise this, but if you can divide the energy consumption by 4, you're going to get a rough guide as to the cost to run it per year. So obviously you want that number to be higher and these stars to be higher. And you can get this off a government website. So you can go through this government website and it just tells you what sort of appliance you want, and you can go through and flick through from the most efficient all the way down to the least efficient. So that's probably a good one to do research before you go and buy a fridge or a washing machine or a dishwasher. If you're going outside the house, some people have got problems where you've got leakage, mainly water, and you don't realise it. So one way of doing that is to obviously take a reading of your water meter, go away, if you're going away for a week or something, reread your water meter when you come back, so you shouldn't have any consumption while you're away. Gas and electricity are going to be a bit harder, but you should be able to, well, gas won't be too bad in summer, you should be able to keep an eye on that, but that, obviously if you're away for a day, you can just see what's your electricity and water meters are after being away for a day or 2. The LED lights have obviously come in, and the fluorescent ones are also even more efficient. So that's a good thing. It's obviously apparently 95% of the energy that used the old incandescent globes was heat, and only 5% light. So we're losing a lot of energy to light our homes when we use the old light bulbs. Painting your house light colours obviously helps because it keeps the reflection inside the house looking brighter. And then with your garden, obviously a lot of people moved to getting rid of their lawns during the last drought, millennium drought, and we're not using as much water as we used to. And you can also use your tank to supplement your garden needs, or you can have it for internal use as well. I know some people do that. Only thing to remember when you're using your own tank is that got to try and keep it away from main thoroughfares, because every car's giving off carbon dioxide and pollutants, and when it comes down in rain, it's going to be coming into your tank, so you just got to be aware of that if you're near a busy road. So drought tolerant plants, using sandy soils can absorb more water, and don't feed your weeds, basically. So our water consumption is obviously more in the garden area, because I suppose we started off as a garden city and we've got still the concepts of having a green lawn, but I think we're moving away from that and then moving towards more native plants and so forth. But the other areas use up a lot of water as well, but we've roughly got 1/3 of a tonne of water going through our house every day. It's quite amazing when you think about it. That's a lot of water draining through your house, and but it's less though than was in the 1990s. We used to use 1/2 tonne of water every day. So when you think about that water's got to come into a collection pool, let the sediment all the soil sediment fall out of it, then you've got to chlorate and fluorinate. It's a lot of work in that, and there's an argument that all that work is that's why it costs some money, about $1.80, $2 a litre. 1,000 litres to buy that water, but that's why you've got all that cost of pumping it in, fluorinating, chlorination, then disposing of it. So one of the things I've done is run my downpipes into the garden and put the big 3-inch plastic downpipes, put that through the garden and then put little holes through it so that every time it rains, the water's going into your garden through the downpipes. And you can run 10, 15 metres of that, and just so that it gradually runs back in your house. So you're not going into the rivers again. And you've got effectively a self-watering system. Other people have got, well, I've used drippers. A lot of people use drippers these days rather than irrigating above ground. Obviously much more efficient because you're not losing your vaporisation. It's going straight into the plant soil. A third of Australians don't have insulated homes, which obviously Sydney, Melbourne, Perth and Adelaide, they're not as extreme temperatures as Canberra, but they should be insulating, and it's really silly because you can get insulation done fairly easily. Mr Rudd tried to get our houses insulated, but with the pink bats story, but it was probably a very poor implementation of that. You can save $6,000 over 30 years if you did that. Now it doesn't sound a lot, but it's obviously just a cumulative benefit of being also warmer in winter and cooler in summer. Insulation standards have increased, and I remember probably 10 or 15 years ago, maybe more, they used to recommend R3, now they recommend R6.5 for insulation in roofs. So they've increased that, and it's not that expensive to put insulation in. So you could save a lot in insulation. This is just an estimate of what we could save in the ACT, around $5 million, and that could be up to $170,000 over 30 years. And then savings in different states again. Canberra doesn't show up as a high savings because you'd think we'd have more savings because of the energy, but it's just Western Australia because it's so hot for so long over there that people are running their air conditioning units, I guess, for longer periods of time. The other reflection too is that Canberra's had a lot more insulation for longer periods of time. They used to sell houses in Canberra where they used to advertise it was insulated. Well, they used to put half an inch of insulation wall in the ceilings, call it insulated to sell it. But in fact, we've probably been one of the better states in Australia as far as getting our insulation done because of the extreme temperatures we've had compared to the rest of Australia. Double glazing. Now this is an interesting one because it's some people are doing it retrospectively, putting in double glazing. It saves obviously in heat and cool, but also noise reduction. It can be very effective in noise reduction. You can save a couple $100 a year in fuel costs, but you could save something like $5,000 over time. The only problem is it's the expense of them. You've got basically three options. You've got the full options where you pull out your whole window frame and you put a whole new window frame with the double glazing. There's companies out at Fishwick now make them the German design and German made or German quality PVC. So they're not actually wood or aluminium because aluminium is a very good conductor. So they're made from polyvinyl chloride or whatever, PVC, plastic. The reason for that is because they can extrude it and they actually have a number of different cells in it so you don't lose heat through the window frames. So the single glazed glazed windows are losing heat twice as fast as a double glazed window. So it's obviously a problem. But the only thing with double glazing, it can retain heat during the summer. You might have to leave your windows open during the night to lose it. So in Australia, we've got the highest solar panel installations in the world. 20% of Australian homes, and South Australia leads the way at 25% of homes. Few incentives there to install solar panels. The government's been giving a few incentives along the way, and the first incentive was actually the buyback of your electricity. In the ACT it was currently 19 cents. I think it started out at 38 cents a kilowatt hour and now down to 19. and it takes about 6 to 7 years to get your money back. So there's reasonable payback periods. Obviously, if you want to sell your house next year, you wouldn't do it, but if you're going to be in your house, say, more than 7 or 8 years, you're going to get the benefit of the cheap electricity. So the average system installs a 5 kilowatt system, and it can produce around 18 to 19 kilowatts of electricity a day, and the average Australian homes using 15 to 25. So it's getting close to covering your household needs, but the only limitation is the time when you use it. Cost of panels. Now, they've been declining since 2012, and the expectations are they will still keep dropping in price. So maybe it's a trade-off whether you buy now, but basically they're half the price they were in 2012. And then looking at the kilowatt hour consumption, so a lot of people buy the 5 kilowatt hour system because you can see there's not much extra in cost, but you get a quicker payback period, and you can then have higher self-consumption because this won't produce enough to cover your self-consumption, and you're getting more savings over time. So that's all good. So it costs around $3,500 for installation without the batteries, and your payback period, well, it can be up to 3 to 5 years depending on your situation, and payback period is longer with your solar batteries. Solar panels can last 25 to 30 years, so you should see most people through their lifetime in their house. And the sunny parts of Australia get the better returns. Obviously, Brisbane and Perth, we're not too bad, but we get a lot of sunny days in winter, so we're not too bad, but not as good as Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide. And the cost of installing a battery is about $1,000 to $3,000 per kilowatt hour. So it's not too bad, but we expect those prices to fall and the payback periods to reduce over time. So it's just to probably wait for more people to buy them. So the only two benefits of the solar panels, obviously, you're consuming your own electricity, you don't have to pay for it, and then you can feed excess back into the grid. And that's for a 5 to 6 kilowatt solar panel, around $1,300 in energy savings. And if you go bigger, it's probably going to be, if you go bigger, you're going to probably might be limited by the roof space. That's going to be probably the problem, because you're going to have 34 panels. So probably that's why people are pretty much in this range and not buying this one, because you're not getting so much benefit. And you need to face north with a tilt 30 degrees to get the best effect, and more electricity you can use during the day, the better, because if you're at home, obviously you're retired, you can do things like use the dishwasher at home during the day, do the washing at home during the day, have a shower in the middle of the day maybe, I don't know. So it's all more options for people who are living in their own home when you're retired. But the biggest problem, of course, is they're producing electricity at the wrong time of day for our peak. And the two peaks, 6 to 8 in the morning, 6 to 8 at night. So solar batteries obviously cover those two periods, and you've got to be able to produce enough excess here to get into the solar batteries to cover you if you're going to be self-sufficient. But yeah, the main story is you've got to have a bigger surplus in the middle of the day for your batteries. So there is incentives to take this up, and more energy efficient situations. So the first one is you can get a small scale technology certificate, how much solar power you provide, and that gets you a subsidy from the government. And depends on how big your system is. So 5 kilowatts again is giving you roughly $3,700 there. So it wouldn't be a bad refund. And there's another one for the ACT government, the solar incentive for pensioners, rebate 60% for supply and installation of a rooftop solar system. Now that'll be an age pension. You have to have an age pension to get that one. Or you can get an interest-free loan from the government. So that's not a bad offer. And then there's another one, which is the federal government, from install a small-scale renewable energy system. You can get, they help with purchase the cost. I'm not sure, I don't know much about this one, but it's obviously a whole range of different ways of reducing your energy consumption. Even hydro systems, solar water pumps, air pumps, I don't know. So it's a whole range of things there. But the main one would be the photovoltaic solar cells. Also, now the batteries are getting discounted. Discount of 2,000 to 4,000 should apply depending on the size of the system. So you can get that through the ACT government. So that's another one to look at for your battery. And of course, that's really going to be the way of the future, I think, because if we can reduce the power during the day and then use it at our peaks, well, that really will affect the demand for electricity that's produced by coal-fired power or whatever power stations we need. Wood heater replacements, so if we want to keep the clean air in Canberra, less wood fires the better, and you can use get $1,000 to install a reverse cycle air conditioner. And one of the things we do through winter is we use our reverse cycle air conditioner all through winter. So we leave it on 24/7 to drag heat from outside, because you basically it's a reverse fridge, your reverse cycle air conditioner. So you don't need to use it just in summer. You can use it all through winter. And the key thing there is we only found our winter electricity bill at $1,100 for the year, for that 3 months. So even though it was running 24/7, now it wasn't running all the time, it was only running when it got down to 18, 19 degrees. But what you've got to remember is there's only a couple of hours of the day when it's not going to be efficient. That's when it drops below 3 degrees. So that's around about 5 to 6 o'clock in the morning. Now that's the problem is that most people will often leave their heating off during the night, and your temperature during the day, temperature inside your house is dropping all through the night. Then you have to burn a lot of either gas or electricity to bring it back up again. You're better actually to keep it ticking over by using a reverse cycle air conditioner, because you've still got heat. I was going to get a graph of that, but the temperature drop overnight is only below 3 degrees around 5 to 6 o'clock in the morning. So all through the night you can still drag heat into your home, and if you've got good insulation on your windows or outside shutters, you'll retain that heat in there. So that's one way of getting around the problem of burning a lot of fuel. I don't know if you know, if you've got gas heaters, they cut in at 6 o'clock and they're really pumping the gas through. But that's because you've got to drag it up for a very low temperature. So reverse cycle can be a very effective way of keeping the house warm in winter. Of course, in summer you just turn it over to cooling. So that's one way of really using your reverse cycle air conditioners all the year round. Of course, some people have got the evaporative air conditioners, so you can't use them in winter, but reverse cycles are a very good system. Yeah, $500, there's an incentive there to install a reverse cycle air conditioner and install a universal circuit reverse cycle split system, $500 to install that, and older systems, you can system reverse cycle systems can be with the upgrade to the older systems. Yeah, you can upgrade the old systems, you get $500 for that. And $100 to remove the wood heater, so pretty good deal there. So that's, if you go into Act Smart, you can find the details of all that. So benefit of energy efficiency homes. This is coming back to when you sell your home now. As you know, we've got it by law, you've got to have an energy efficiency rating when you sell your home. And obviously the higher the better, 6 to 7, sometimes you can get 8, but the key thing is most people are in the 2 to 3s. You've got insulation in the roof maybe, but they don't have double glazed windows, and they've got big windows. The other thing is the more windows you've got, the more heat loss you're going to have. So this is an average home here, 4 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, probably not so average, but the average size of the home, 235 square metres or 25 squares. So that's a reasonably big home, but you've got a very low energy rating on that one. Whereas a townhouse, a benefit of townhouses, you've got two common walls where you're not losing heat out of those two walls, the first thing. And you've probably got smaller windows because you've only got front windows and back windows, so you're not losing heat out of the amount of windows you've got is less, so you're not losing too much heat. So they've got an energy rating of 6. The house size is also smaller, so that's another reason why you got a better efficiency there. But there's the main story is that that rating indicates the cost to heat your home per year. So if you've got a 6-star house, it's only costing you $400 a year, $440. A 1-star house is $1,500, so you're saving $1,000 a year in heating costs on average if you can get a 6-star rating on your house. And of course, hopefully in the future people will be more aware of that sort of thing when they're selling their homes. Consider some of the things when you do your renovations. It's obviously keep your this is a sustainable home in Victoria, an 8.2 energy rating, and it's obviously got a lot of windows, so they're probably all double glazed. They've probably got insulation through the walls and the ceilings, and they're probably on a slab, a concrete slab, but excellent insulation, double glazing, east-west facing. All these things are helping the efficiencies. This is a retrofitted one in Adelaide, an 8.4 rated, so you don't have to be a new home to get your rating up, okay? And using thermal mass, which is using things like that have slate floors and things like that, so that when the sun comes in the winter, it absorbs into the slate floors. Moving air from the cold places to the hot areas of the house is another area you can do. Energy efficient houses. This in Nevada desert. So they've got 30 solar panels on that house and doing all the energy efficiency things. Another part of this is in the Rockies again. Reduced the energy bill by 90% in that house. So there's a passive design company in Canberra called Passive House, I think it's called Passive House, and they're right into this sort of stuff. So keeping the house heated efficiently, but also keeping the fresh air coming through. And they've obviously got look at all the different things from solar panels to LED lighting. And there's all the things we can do to improve our efficiency. So there's a few green homes around. You can look on the websites and look at different things. So we'll go back there. So basically, the spending, what you spend on your house, obviously we do keep improving our house over time. The average house in Australia has gone up by about 50% since the average house size has gone up about 50% since 1970. So we're living in bigger houses. When I first came to Canberra, in a Guppy house, you used to only heat the lounge room and the kitchen, and every other room in the house was cold, very cold. And probably most people can remember those days that you'd only heat the bare essentials with a 2-bar radiator or the old oil heater radiators, and those were the days when we used to use electricity, or sometimes even going before the 1970s was oil. But we had a limited amount of heating in those days, but and we also had a limited amount of insulation. Now we have bigger houses and we heat bigger areas. We have gone to open style houses with open style rooms, like a lounge room, dining room, and so we're now having to heat bigger areas than we used to, and so we need to really try and keep the cost down of that. And so looking at those sort of things, from insulation to solar panels to just even the positioning of your house and the double glazing as well. But one of the thing is, it's all about getting that money back when you sell. So I think, just giving you some ideas there. So